This video is the biggest load of hoo-ha I've ever seen. Why do you insist we watch this stupid thing?
Am I the only one who understands the complexities of this ambitious cinematic masterpiece? This movie isn't stupid! You're stupid!
Yeah, I'm honestly speechless after watching this series finale, and not in a good way, because on one hand, is the episode fine by itself? Maybe. It's tolerable. It's better than most of the episodes we gotten. But on the other hand, it's not a good episode for a series finale by itself. And this is because the episode is way too rushed. They rushed all the character plot lines on the side way too fast. And the victory that the boys finally earn over Vought and Homelander itself is undeserving because the pacing was too fast, and also everything just falls into their lap due to bad writing. For example, Homelander is now owning the White House and he's about to give his God speech, and the boys plan to infiltrate the White House. Now, the way they go about this, do they have Butcher walk in the front gates of the White House like they've been advertising all over Amazon posters? No, that would be correct marketing. And at Amazon Prime, we can't have that. We can only have false advertisement. So they don't have them do that. Instead, they have them go into an underground tunnel similar to the ones from season 4 with zero to no security to get through nearly. Now you think because Homelander is basically the owner of the world and he's at the White House, one of the most secure places in the world, the same place where in real life, if you look at the gate a funny way from across the street, the guards will be ready to shoot you at any given moment. Yeah, you would think because their superhero or superpowered god is now there, that there will be more security, especially since he's backed by Vought, but no, that's not the case. There's little to no security. Now the boys do get through 90% of the underground White House tunnel until they reach a trap at the very end, but that trap is short-lived as Ashley pulls them out in the nick of time, going back to the statement I said before about everything falling into the boys' lap. Yeah, that took a left turn with the whole underground tunnel plan, but it really wasn't too much of a left turn, as they were bailed out in seconds later. And the cherry on top for this easy infiltration of the White House is that as soon as they get out of the tunnels, they're 99% there. Now the group does surely but slowly get split apart. For example, we have Andy versus the Deep and MM and Huey versus O-Father, who are the only two supes at the White House as security for some reason. And this leaves Butcher and Kimiko versus Homelander. Now the final showdown against Homelander was very, very sluggish and so disappointing, especially since this is a fight that's been built up since episode 1 of season 1. Throughout the fight is Butcher and Kimiko trying to tag team him, and Kimiko now has the nuclear blast that could get rid of not only V1 but Compound V in general. So you would think Homelander will prioritize in killing her before Butcher, but he doesn't really do that here. He shoots a laser at her once, but it doesn't do too much damage to her for some reason. He only does the little love tap laser that he gave Victoria Newman when he exposed her for having Compound V in her system. When literally in episode 1 of season 5, we see him rip Kimiko in half with his laser vision. Now, just because she has nuclear powers that could take away your powers, that doesn't give her extra durability. She just has the ability to take away powers. So I'm not sure why the writers decided to make Homelander so weak with the laser eyes in this fight here. And eventually in the same fight, Ryan joins the battle to help them. Now here's another example of things falling into the team's lap. From Ryan's point of view, he doesn't know that Butcher and Kimiko are at the White House. He just knows that his father is giving that speech and he just wants to go fight him again. But the last time they fought, he got brutally injured. So what makes you think you're gonna do something different this time? Also, Butcher and Kimiko went into this fight without knowing that Ryan will come and save them. So again, things are just falling into everybody's laps here. Another weird thing I found out throughout this fight is that Homelander is trying to fly away, but he keeps getting pulled back. Even though we've seen Homelander move way faster than he does in this fight throughout the rest of the series. Literally in last week's episode, we had Frenchie double tap the wall from a very far distance in that school hideout that they have, and Homelander was there within the blink of an eye. Yet when he's fighting Kimiko, Butcher, and Ryan, he's moving at normal speeds that a normal human would. Why? It's almost like both episodes were written by completely different people, which might be the case here, which might explain the constant inconsistency of power scaling in this final season of The Boys. With any other human, Homelander could fly him out to space in 3 seconds, or You know, he could fly the Frenchie in the blink of an eye, but when it comes to powered people like Kimiko, Butcher, and Ryan, he doesn't know what to do, and he's moving much slower. Not only does this show to me that there's different writers for each episode, which causes power scaling inconsistency, but this also shows that the people in the boys universe who have Compound V in their system never really trained on how to use their powers in certain situations for combat. Usually they're just so used to bullying normal people that when they finally fight someone with Compound V in their system also, or who has somewhat the same strength level as them, they don't know what to do with themselves. You can imagine it like an 8th grader always fighting on a kindergartner or a 1st grader, but once that 8th grader finally fights another 8th grader, they're gonna get clobbered because they don't know what to do against someone with the same strength as them. And like I said before, throughout the fight, Homelander's trying to fly away, but everybody keeps pulling him back down and yanking him around the room like he's nothing, like he doesn't have super strength or speed again. Now here's where the defender of me will try to give the writers somewhat some credit. Usually throughout the whole series when Homelander flies, not only does he fly straight up all the time, but he always flies up using that bicycle method where he folds his arms like this and then he flies up, kind of, you know, to help him boost. But here he's not able to do that because one, he's in such a tight space, and two, he has to fly in a diagonal angle to get out of the White House. But I'm not going to give the writers any credit because they don't know how to write their own show, as we've previously seen Homelander in earlier seasons get out of tougher situations flying just straight up much faster. For example, in season 3, we have Homelander flying out of a situation where Butcher, Huey, and Soldier Boy were holding him down, about to take away his power, and he's able to just fly straight up faster than ever, crashing through that ceiling. But here he doesn't even bother to try that. Why? Because it's different writers, and we don't know how to do power scaling because we hire different writers. If Huey, Butcher, and Soldier Boy himself, so the same Soldier Boy who was arguably stronger than Homelander at the time, because that was the really first person who could match up to Homelander in the boys universe, if they couldn't hold him down, why is Ryan and Butcher alone enough for Kimiko to take his power away? Why can both of them by themselves hold Homelander by the arms while Kimiko finishes him off? Like, it just doesn't make sense. So yeah, basically they won because of bad writing, and the writers forgot how strong Homelander was in previous seasons. Now with that being said, I will say it was very satisfying how they executed how much weaker Homelander is without his powers and how much of a crybaby man-child he is. Anthony Starr acted his behind off here. He did a really great job showing that, because he hid behind the armor of him being the strongest one there is throughout the whole show, but now that that armor is taken off of him, he doesn't know what to do with himself but cry like a baby. And I always love when pieces of fiction show a powerful person losing their power and then they're significantly weaker than someone who has regular hand-to-hand combat, such as Batman and Superman or Aquaman and Black Manta. Now in this case it's Homelander and Butcher just beats the brakes off of him. And it is very satisfying, but what led up to this moment wasn't satisfying. It was just very sluggish and sloppy and inconsistent, especially from what we've seen Homelander do before. Had Homelander put a little more effort into his laser eyes, he would have ended the fight, just like he ended Kimiko basically in episode 1. If he would have used that same newfound strength to get out of that situation of Ryan and Butcher holding him down like he did in season 3, he would have been alive still with his powers. But we just don't do that here for some reason. And also, right before that fight, they had some cameraman drop the camera on the floor, or they left the camera in the room so they could see the whole fight go down, showing everybody in the world how much of a fraud their quote-unquote new god is. Now, the only thing about this is I wish some of the people in that audience was in the same room as Homelander, kind of in the same way some people were in that same room with him in episode 1 of season 5. And if they started to not believe him, the psychics could have told him, and then he could have crashed out then and there, and then that's when Butcher walks in, and then that's when the camera pans on their fight. That would have been the much better option, but again, the fight still would have been sloppy. Now the second half of the episode involving the resolution of Butcher's storyline was pretty good, and it was pretty close to the source material, but it still kind of felt a little bit rushed or a little bit mediocre in a way. So after killing Homelander, you would think Butcher is happy and everything, but actually 2 parts of Butcher dies along with Homelander. One of those things being his relationship with Ryan, because Ryan doesn't want to be around Butcher anymore. Because Ryan explains that, yeah, he killed Homelander, but that doesn't mean he chooses his father over Butcher, because Butcher is still crazy, and I'm glad Ryan has common sense. This is one of the only things that the writers got right. Because ever since Ryan has known Butcher, he's tried to be there for Butcher, and Butcher constantly pushes him away unless he needs him as a weapon to use against Homelander. And I'm so glad Ryan grew up and started to recognize this. If they had Ryan go back to Butcher immediately, I would have probably turned the show off right then and there. And I wouldn't have seen the rest of the ending. And the second part of him that died is Terror, his pet dog. Now, we don't know the exact cause of his death. Maybe he ate some chocolate, or maybe it's the radiation coming from Kimiko after using her powers that they mentioned, but they kind of just glance over it as if it's a joke. So yeah, we don't know what killed Terror. And after seeing his dog's dead body, you can see Butcher is fully crashing out. He's becoming his evil self from the comic just a little bit, but not too much. And Huey's the only one that picks up on this, so he follows Butcher to wherever he's going. And once Huey tracks down Butcher, Butcher reveals that his plan for mass genocide against all Supes is to go into Vought Tower and put the last of the Supe killing virus into Vaught's sprinkling system, and once everybody clocks in for work, he'll trigger the sprinkler system manually, killing everybody in that building, and then in a few days later, the virus will spread to the rest of the world. Now, I find this plan heavily flawed, and here we go with the inconsistent writing again, because in episode 2, when they used the virus, all they had to do was conceal the building with literal plastic and painter's tape to contain the virus to stop it from spreading outside of the building. And on top of that, Vought also had their contamination unit seal the virus even more, and the virus never spreaded. So why would Butcher think that putting the Supe killing virus into Vaught's building sprinkler systems will work? Not only that, but 90% of the people in the Vought building are human. The only Supes in that building were the 7, which most of them are dead and one of them retired. So you wouldn't be killing anything, so really you would just be using Vought as a beacon point to spread the virus. But again, if Vought gets whiff that the virus is being spread through their building, they're gonna have procedures to seal the building airtight. As technologically advanced as Vought is, I'm sure they are able to seal off that building. And if the boys in episode 2 can seal off the Supe killing virus with literal plastic and tape, then Vought can definitely seal off their building, stopping the spread of the virus going out into the rest of the world. So really, this was Butcher's way of just saying, I'm done with life. I want to come up with this convoluted and stupidly flawed plan just for someone who looks like the spitting image of my little brother who died to stop me ultimately, to just kill me and my life. That's all that was. Now, he does make a good point to Huey in the same conversation also. He just mentions the idea that Vought will rise again, not talking about the prequel, but Vought will rise again, and that there will be another Homelander-like person out there someday, which is true. But again, Butcher's plan is just flawed here and it's not gonna work. Now, it might stop Vought temporarily for like maybe a month, but that's about it. But Huey actually believed Butcher is really gonna go through with this, so he puts an end to Butcher permanently. Now, this is a really good resolution for Butcher's character, because the only thing he's really lived for is to kill Homelander and any Supe that gets in his way, and he's done. And not only was he done, but the parts of him that lived within Ryan and Terra had also died. So this was, again, Butcher's way of just giving up on life. Now, as for the rest of the stuff that happened in this episode on the side during the Homelander fight with Butcher, it was kind of bad. Now, with that being said, these side things that happened did intertwine with the big main plot a little bit. But again, they were just still bad because of how bad the power scaling or the writing or character decisions were made. So the first example of this is during Frenchie's funeral at the beginning of this episode. Everybody's sad, mourning for him at his grave, including Kimiko. And Huey reads this memoir left behind by Frenchie, and in the middle of reading it, it gets to the part where Frenchie is saying that he's seen everybody's buttholes. And then the letter goes on for too long, and it's just telling in vile details of each time he's seen their butthole and why he was there to see their butthole in the first place, and even how he reacted to seeing their buttholes. And this scene was clearly meant for a gag or a joke or something, and I did laugh a little bit, not because I thought this was funny, but because it's funny that the writers thought this was a good idea to include here in the final episode ever. It's bad enough that you censored Frenchie's death in last week's episode, but now you're making his funeral into a joke? Why? And you can even tell with the certain characters in the scene based on certain camera angles that they're trying so hard not to laugh and break character because of all the butthole jokes that's going around. And those butthole jokes go on for like a minute and a half, wasting screen time, also known as filler. And Kimiko is the only one that's like, doesn't have that face like she's about to laugh. Like she's the only one putting an effort here. Again, what could have been a serious funeral for a friend that's been there since day one, something really sad, something impactful, just turns into a bunch of fart jokes. Now the second bad thing I really wanted to talk about was Annie versus the Deep's fight. Here, she's really feeling herself because in last week's episode, she was able to defeat Dogman, which is a F tier suit by the way. But not only that, she decides to fly them out the window like it's Man of Steel versus General Zod for the first time. And not only that, she decides to fly the Deep, also known as the King of the Ocean, to a beach where there is an ocean. Why? Why would you give him home turf? Now, the audience knows that he's not allowed back into the water or else the fish and sharks and stuff will kill him. But Annie herself doesn't know that. So again, this is just the writers insulting our intelligence. And they think they're gonna make us forget by adding all those sex jokes in the beginning. And that because this is the final episode, we finally get to see Annie fight the Deep, that we're supposed to be so locked in that we forget actual common sense. Why would you take someone like your opponent to a place where they have home field advantage? For all Annie knows, he could have summoned an army of sharks or something, or he could have caused a tidal wave. Like, she really doesn't know what could have happened to her there, but she decides to take him to the ocean. That's like me taking Superman to the sun and wondering why I lost. Or that's like me taking Magneto and challenging him to a fight, but that location of that fight is in a junk or scrapyard. Like, it just doesn't make sense. Also, I'm not gonna count this fight as a victory for Annie because all she did was just push him into the ocean and the sea creatures fulfilled their promise and killed him. Even Annie herself was confused, so you know she didn't mean to do that. So I'm not counting that. So yeah, Annie still only has one victory out of 5 seasons and 7 years of being a show. So yeah, Annie, don't pat yourself, don't flatter yourself too much because you really didn't do nothing here. You actually tried to make the fight more difficult for yourself, but you got lucky. And some people might argue, oh, but maybe she saw the recording of the Deep running away from last week's episode. Yeah, she might have saw the recording, but nobody saw the conversation that he had with the shark. In fact, he's the only one who could understand what the shark was saying, so Annie definitely wouldn't have known that. So again, this is the writers insulting our intelligence. And this next part here isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's a little weird. So the way they defeat O-Father is that Huey is shooting at him, and right before O-Father uses his sonic scream on Huey, MM comes up behind him and covers his mouth with a titanium ball gag. Now this is weird because this basically fell into the boy's lap. MM didn't know what that ball gag was made of. He didn't know that would actually work, as they both are confused and shocked. And the only reason the ball gag is there is because it's a gift to him from Ashley for their pleasure time. So now this has me thinking, was Ashley planning to use that titanium ball gag to kill O-Father while they have sex? Just imagine him screaming to the heavens and the titanium is causing the echo to scream back into his mouth, pause, making his head explode. And that would have been step 1 of her rebellion against Homelander and Vought. And even more evidence that points towards this is that once everything wraps up, Ashley as the president goes on the news and claims that she's done nothing wrong and that she was never on their side. But while she's saying that, she has no hint of sadness or anything for her recently dead boyfriend. So that just shows me that she was planning to kill him, but MM just beat her to it. Now again, this fell into MM's lap because he didn't know this was going to work. And the last really terrible thing about this episode was how they treated the Gen V characters again. Because now their job is to just drive the previous people from the previous episode who were about to be killed by the Cat Girl and Dogman to Canada. So instead of staying behind and helping Annie in her fight against Homelander, they have to go drive a bunch of strangers to Canada to never be seen again. And the worst part is, Annie's telling them not to fight, and they actually listen to her. Now, if you watch the first 2 seasons of Gen V like I did, when has Marie or anybody in her group, especially Marie again, when have they been known to listen to someone who tells them not to get involved in something? When have they listened? The answer is never, because that's never been the case. Whenever an adult, especially at Godolkin University, tells them to not do something, they're gonna do it or they're gonna investigate that thing. If they did listen to every adult that tells them not to get involved, Gen V as a show wouldn't have happened. So again, this is just bad character writing and character assassination, because that whole group would have rebelled. And had they rebelled like they should have, they could have helped in the fight against Homelander. And then Homelander not being able to escape with flight would have made more sense, because more people are preventing him from doing so. It just doesn't make sense, especially for Marie's character. She's all about helping people no matter what. And she's just gonna let herself be sidelined by someone who can't even win in her own show? That doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Like, they really could have helped here. That whole Gen V team really could have helped here. Like, had Gen V joined that fight against Homelander in the White House office, I would have forgiven them for not letting Homelander being able to fly away. Because we had people like Sam and Jordan and Kate and Marie herself. I would have forgiven the fight being sluggish if the Gen V characters were fighting Homelander with Butcher. But no, let's just write them off to go drive to Canada. Because we don't know what to do with you characters. Because we didn't have enough budget for an additional 5 episodes. And now that I'm thinking about it with Gen V, they could have used Butcher's statement of Vault Rising, not the prequel, someday, and them having a second Homelander-like figure. They could have used the Gen V characters for their season 3 to kind of investigate Vault and their doings and try to like prevent them from rising again, or to prevent the rise of another Homelander. But instead, we're just gonna cancel them because we want to do this prequel show and this spinoff show about Mexico. So again, just bad writing right there. Overall, I give this episode a 4 out of 10, and that's me being generous. Again, it's not a bad episode, it's just a terrible series finale. Had this episode been in the replacement of last week's episode or episode 6, I would have given it a much higher score, like an 8 or a 9. But the fact that this finale happened and it still doesn't feel like a finale because they left so many doors open, because their writing team and behind the scenes is so chaotic that it flowed into the show somehow, is just sad. And it's not just in this episode, it's throughout the whole season. After the first 2 episodes, they just insult the audience's intelligence by having bad writing, and they think we're gonna forget about established lore by having the main characters say sex jokes every 2 lines. Like, no, that's not how that works. I'm very disappointed in how this whole season went, let alone this episode. And I'm about to say something crazy too. The comic book ending of The Boys is much better than this ending. I don't care. You could fight with me in the comments if you like to, feel free. But the comic book ending, yeah, it was edgelord slop that could have been written by a middle schooler, but at least that comic book knew that the series was coming to an end. At least they knew when to take things seriously at times. Their version of a scorched earth that they've been hyping up in the comic actually felt like a scorched earth. The skies were dark, buildings were destroyed, main characters were dying left and right. Homelander was their god already without using "Oh Father" and trying to do it the religious way. He just took over as president, and he had other suits backing him up. And that's when we got that shot from the posters that they try to hype us up with Butcher going straight into the White House with a bunch of suits flying into the sky as he's going in there to fight Homelander. So yeah, the comic is edgelord slop, but at least the comic is consistent, takes itself seriously when it needs to, and their finale actually feels like a finale with high stakes. And another thing with this episode really quickly, they tried so hard and so desperately to go back to season 1 vibes, because they don't have Kimiko speak for whatever reason here. I understand Frenchie's dead, but you've been speaking this whole season. Why did you stop speaking now? They also do this by having Huey come up with his own plans instead of just arguing with Butcher. Actually, the whole team doesn't even argue with Butcher, they kind of just go with his plans, similar to how they did in season 1. And not only does, Huey come up with his own plan in this episode, his own plans actually work. Where was this writing in the rest of this season, minus Kimiko not talking anymore? Where was this effort of character throughout season 5? Why wait to the last episode to try to go back to season 1 quality? That just makes no sense. So yeah, like I said, 4 out of 10 episode for a series finale. It just makes this whole season bad and a waste of our time basically. Just because you have 90% of filler and one good big thing happened at the end of that, it doesn't make up for the rest of the time you've wasted for the audience. That's what this show needs to understand. Just because you have a big scene at the end doesn't make up for the trash beginning and middle. Also, this show was hyping us up so much that it released in movie theaters. So if you're one of those people who bought $30 tickets and paid $30 more for food and snacks to watch this, you're dumb. I'm sorry, you're just dumb. You really wasted movie money tickets on this show that was gonna be free a few hours later. How did you feel? How did you feel to pay almost $60 for a movie experience that was rushed? How did it feel? Let me know in the comment section down below. And like always, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you can be notified when I make more videos. And hopefully those videos will be having me more happier about the stuff I'm reviewing rather than this slop here. So with that being said, I'll see you guys in the next one.